Welcome to part 2 of the Inner Agility series, where we're illuminating that in the purest sense of the word, manifestation is actually not a matter of addition, but of subtraction. Inner agility is how well you're able to subtract the specific ingredients in your inner image, which are blocking the smooth fulfillment of the goal. If you focus on training your own inner agility, which is what astrological transurfing is, then you'll improve on 3 separate components of strength, balance, and coordination when it comes to all of your manifestation. In part 1, I explained how the presence of an invisible ingredient in the inner image can block any or all manifestations. And so if you haven't watched part 1 yet, go back and watch that so you can carry those principles with you wherever you go. Armed with that background knowledge, we're going to go over how to edit your inner image in detail so you have more control over your outer reality. I'll need you to keep an open mind and suspend any doubts as they come up until you really get a handle on these principles, because they go against what society has conditioned us to believe. Let's examine what happens when you have several inner negative patterns all happening at the same time, but you're only aware of half of them, as we illustrated in part 1. If only half of your inner patterns are within your conscious awareness, then it means at this point you only have 50% control over your inner metaphysical image, which is what drives all of manifestation. This is why people try manifestation techniques, energy work, whatever it is, and it works half of the time, or it works at first, but then the problem returns. Of course it's going to return if you didn't dissolve the block at the deepest layer. We all have many karmic impressions on the soul level that are out of our mind's awareness, and thus out of our control. Those karmic impressions are so ingrained in the soul's experience that they will continue producing related thoughts and feelings as we demonstrated in part 1, but you will only be able to address and surrender the ones that you've become conscious of. That means that the unconscious karmic impressions feel permanent to you, even though they don't have to be. Because you are not aware of a specific impression, the conscious mind will conclude that this is just how life is, and you believe that you have to suffer to the extent that you can't change how a pattern is manifesting if it's unconscious. Or you believe that certain goals your soul might want are simply too expensive, too time-consuming, too pie in the sky, or just not meant for you. These are not absolute truths. They are relative truths, which can and will shift. Your soul is still carrying this past karmic impression because you didn't have a chance to resolve it before you made your transition. Remember the specific cake we thought we were going to end up with when we believed the mixing bowl was empty? Let's take a look at what we thought was happening before we realized there was actually a hidden invisible ingredient in the bowl, which our physical eyes couldn't have perceived because the impression itself is technically invisible and formless. This cake is what you thought you created during your law of attraction process. It equates to the business that you visualized during your manifestation process. However, remember in part 1 we discussed a specific karmic impression that your soul was carrying about not deserving praise in positive interactions in your relationships? Let's look at the actual situation that was created as you attempted to use the law of attraction for business success. This includes both what you tried to create and also a karmic impression that was already in your inner image from before, which you were not aware that you were carrying. Since the karmic impression about not deserving praise, affection, and rewarding relationships wasn't conscious, you were unable to clear or consciously change it. This meant it will automatically be included in your inner metaphysical image without you knowing, until you become conscious of what is going on inside of you. Until then, it's an invisible ingredient to any and all of your manifestations. This impression is the invisible ingredient from your inner image that went into your cake without you knowing, and in this case, it created an undesirable effect. This is why you ended up with this cake instead, which is not what you said you wanted, but it's what you got because the outcome matches the vibrational signal of your inner image exactly. This cake is equivalent to the reality sector that unfolded for you, which contained initial business success, but then a string of disasters that you couldn't seem to rectify, which only kept getting worse. The good news is that if you develop your inner agility, you can consistently receive smooth and satisfying results with your manifestations. Everything that your soul is yearning for is available to you, just waiting for you to receive it. In order to consciously choose which reality sector you want to unfold in your physical world out of the infinite number of them that are still in a metaphysical form, we have to do it in a way that will seem counterintuitive at first. We have to think in terms of subtracting blocks. And this means we first have to stop all of our attempts to change our current reality sector, which is going to require you to up your inner agility game, and that's what this channel is for. Don't forget to share, like, and subscribe so I can get this amazing information out to even more people. The conscious mind will find it very hard to believe that ceasing all attempts to edit your current life track would actually bring about the desired change, but I want you to stick with me anyway because I'm going to show you the principles behind how this works. Let's illuminate the relationship between the state of our inner image, or the unity between our soul and our mind, and our external situation, or which reality sector has manifested for us physically at any given point. It would be very difficult to overstate the power of your inner image. It allows you to tune into any number of possible reality sectors out of the infinite number which are in the space of variations. So what is the space of variations? This is a term from Reality Transurfing steps 1 through 5, which is a work channeled by Vadim, which I combine with the precision of the soul's messages in the natal chart to help you illuminate your soul's path forward. The space of variations is the invisible energy basis behind any physical manifestation that we see in our world. The number of possible reality sectors that could unfold is infinite, and each one of them remains in a metaphysical form until an individual tunes into that specific sector via the unity of their soul and mind. At that point, if the person is close enough to that specific sector, meaning as long as it's not too big of a jump for them, then it manifests, whether the person consciously wanted to be in that sector or whether they got there because they didn't bother to do anything about their inner resistance. Since we perceive time as linear, we have been conditioned to believe that we have little control over which layer of reality we'll realize at a given point. But the truth is there are an infinite number of potential reality sectors that could realize if we understand how to edit our inner image in such a way that matches the reality sector that we want to see manifest. Because the space of variations is infinite, then by definition there are success sectors for every soul. Reality Transurfing can't help you choose which reality sectors would be most satisfying to your individual soul, but the natal chart does contain that kind of information, and we'll get to that in a moment. Just know that the reality sector that manifests itself physically in your life will be the one that perfectly matches your soul's inner image, whether you're aware of how this works or not. So if you want control over your inner navigation system so you can explore the space of variations in a way that feels right to you, then you have to pay attention to the unity of the soul and the mind. If they agree on fearfulness regarding a certain situation and they sustain that fear over a long enough period, there's a greater likelihood you will be transported to a sector of variations where that exact fear is realized. If, on the other hand, both are united in the joy and satisfaction that comes with having a loving family, so long as that inner image is sustained, then the sector of reality that realizes will be one where even more family joy is reflected back to you. How do you find your soul's success sectors? You can't do it by copying someone else. Yours materialize only when your soul and your mind achieve total harmony over what true soul fulfillment feels like to you, and then sustain the inner feeling of what it would be like to be moving toward that life experience already. The reason you must sustain it is because the reality mirror works with a delay. Here's where most people get tripped up. They think the best thing to do is to edit their current life track. When I say edit your current life track, I mean try to solve your own problems by pushing against whatever you don't like about your external circumstances. The problem with that is humans can't edit the scripts or decorations of any given reality sector. Our free will means that we have the freedom to choose a different reality sector out of the space of variations, not to edit the one we're currently in, and that's a very crucial distinction. We don't have the power to edit each individual sector, but that's not even necessary when we can just choose a different life track that we like better, as long as we understand what it means to choose. If you have trouble believing that there is really an alternative sector of reality where your current obstacles are no longer there and all your current desires have materialized, that's understandable. You might think, if there really was such a sector of reality, I'd be living in it already because I've tried everything I can think of and nothing has worked. This inner state of confusion is common, and it stems from a misunderstanding about the nature of reality, which behaves like a mirror but with one crucial caveat. It works with a delay. If you smile in front of an ordinary mirror, your reflection smiles back at you simultaneously. But the reality mirror works more slowly. If you make a change to your inner image to reflect how it would feel to be living out your goal, that's a great first step. But you have to sustain it despite the lack of initial proof that your goal is on the way. This is easier said than done, unless you understand and expect the delay function. If the reality mirror had no delay, people would be less confused about the energy basis of why they were transferred to a new reality sector where they're disappointed. But what they didn't notice is that the feeling of disappointment came first because they didn't anticipate or plan for the delay. They didn't see any initial proof that their goal was coming, but instead of attributing that to the reality mirror's delay, they concluded they did something wrong and allowed the prime real estate in their inner image to be filled with disappointment, frustration, and despair. And what kind of reality sector do you think would match an inner image like that? Probably a pretty disappointing one. So what other option do we have besides editing the scripts and decorations of our current reality sector? Well, we have something even more powerful than that, which involves editing our inner image to align with external intention. This is another principle from Reality Transurfing by Vadim, and I use it when I teach people how to let go of stuck resistance to a specific combination of negative emotions that has formed an excess potential in their inner image. Maybe you've listened to the spiritual teacher Abraham Hicks, who talks about how every subject is two subjects, the presence of that subject and the absence of that subject. We can also think about this in terms of each subject having a positive polarity and a negative one. Vibrationally, when something comes into our life, whether it's a new job we've been wanting or something that we've been afraid of for a long time that finally manifests, it's because we've spent a lot of time inwardly tuning into the presence of that event in our lives. If we hadn't been tuned into the presence of that event, then that subject would not have come into our life because we would have been more tuned into its absence. This is like getting accustomed to living in a reality sector without the job of our dreams and telling yourself, well, I guess this is just how life is. This is why Abraham Hicks often says every subject is two subjects, its presence and its absence. But because many are not aware that they could simply edit their inner image and switch the polarity by vibrationally tuning into its presence, what they do instead is use their physical eyes to observe the absence of that goal in their life. This automatically tunes them into the absence end of the polarity, and it leads people to try and force a change in the physical outer world. In other words, they overcompensate. But remember, humans can't edit the scripts and decorations of our current reality sector. We can only tune into a different one we like more. I know it looks like we're editing our current reality sector because we perceive time as linear. But actually, many different reality sectors are unfolding in our outer world, which are a match to our individual inner image, which form a conglomerate that we call reality. When people try to overcompensate by trying to edit their current reality sector and taking massive action on the physical plane, this is called using internal intention in transurfing terms. Internal intention is essentially the decision to use the force of the personal will to change the picture on a movie screen with your hands. It's when people say, I'm frustrated that I don't have this thing that I want, so I'm going to go figure out how to fix the situation by myself. This entire inner image is focused on hard work that seemingly has to be done in response to the appearance that the desired goal isn't here yet. Do you see how that corresponds with inwardly tuning in to the absence of the goal? It's obvious trying to change a movie plot by using your hands to shove the actors around doesn't work. But when it comes to perceiving energy, many people become confused as to why the world doesn't respond to a direct assertion of their will. The reason is because, by definition, the direct assertion of our inner will always involves a focus on how our desired goal isn't here yet. Therefore, our inner image is one of lack and unfulfillment, which is why we keep getting transported to an outer reality sector with more of the same unfulfilling scripts and decorations. The mind has a tendency to simply tune into more events that have the same frequency of your current obstacles. If you're in the habit of allowing your mind to be your master instead of training the mind to be a servant to the soul, then it's likely you've mainly relied on internal intention. This will trap you in a never-ending cycle of doubt, exhaustion, pessimism, and scarcity, because the reality mirror can only reflect back what you're outwardly emitting. Here's the good news. There's a much better alternative. Because our soul's fulfillment already exists in metaphysical form, we can inwardly tune into it by aligning ourselves with external intention in order to arrive there. External intention does not edit our current life track because that's frankly a waste of energy. Instead, it simply selects a different reality sector out of the infinite number in the space of variations where our current problems no longer exist. It corresponds to allowing the goal to realize itself. Of course, this involves trusting the divine intelligence and not the limited conscious mind to come up with a means to the goal. Notice how we're no longer trying to overcompensate or fix anything. Thus, the reality mirror stops reflecting back that endless stream of problems that we thought we had to overcome with the force of our personal will. When overcompensation is eliminated from our inner image, then our outer reality will eventually reflect back the fact that the goal has been realized already. This is what I mean by precise manifestation being more about what we subtract or eliminate from our inner image. Vibrationally tuning into the presence of the goal, in spite of not seeing any physical proof, means changing your inner attitude and looking for the littlest positive clues, which will first come in the form of feelings. By doing so, you will be changing the reflection that bounces back in your outer reality, as long as you keep letting go of the urge to overcompensate. Letting go does not mean to suppress your emotions, but rather to accept and then surrender them. And we'll get into how to do that in a moment. We're about to assess your current inner metaphysical image so that you can start gaining more control around which reality sector unfolds in your physical world. Before we do the assessment, we need to briefly talk about the energy basis behind all of the blocks and obstacles we experience in our everyday life. The energetic root of problems are called excess potentials, and they lead to obstacles when we allow ourselves to live inside comparative reality. But what does that actually mean? On the spiritual plane, every subject has an equal value. It's only human beings who assign overvaluations to subjects that we place on a pedestal in our minds, and then assign undervaluations to subjects that we feel are beneath us or that we don't like. An excess potential is simply an instance where a human being has created a false undervaluation or overvaluation of a certain subject. Examples of excess potentials include guilt, perfectionism, artificially elevated importance, superiority, or inferiority. Let's look at how artificially elevated importance is created. If we sustain the negative emotions for long enough, we risk placing the subject on a pedestal and inwardly worshiping it in our minds. Any overvaluation or undervaluation sets the balancing forces against us. Excess potentials always arise as long as we're living in comparative reality, because then we form dependence relationships that aren't really there. We feel superior to a certain person because we have more money, or we feel inferior to a different person because they have a skill that we don't. If you don't take anything else from this video, I want you to realize you can choose to stop living in comparative reality, and that will take care of the energy basis behind many of the obstacles that you thought were unrelated to the comparisons you were making inwardly. All you have to do is stop comparing people to each other, stop comparing yourself to other people, stop comparing your relationship status, job title, or whatever else to that of others. Comparing is not necessary at all, and it actually works against you. Those inner comparisons are how an excess potential becomes an obstacle because of the overvaluation and undervaluation between subjects that the balancing forces will seek to correct. They will do this in whatever method takes the least amount of energy to restore an equal value across all subjects. This certain subject will be kept out of your reach by the balancing forces until you finally dissolve the excess potential, at which point the balancing forces will leave you alone. Here are some more examples of false comparisons that would trigger the corrective action of the balancing forces if you were to hold them in your inner image. I am a good person because they are a bad person. Or, those people aren't living in the right way and we should educate them. Or, I'm not as worthy of success as my favorite musical artist because they are more talented than I am. The implication is that certain people or subjects have a higher or lower value compared to other people or other subjects. This is a false comparison because on the spiritual plane, every subject has equal value to every other. Since nature will always seek to restore a balance, the job of the balancing forces is to get rid of any false comparisons between subjects. The pathway they choose will vary by situation, but it will always be the way that takes the least amount of energy. This can mean introducing an obstacle in the life path of the person who created the excess potential. And you might say, what's the big deal about comparing? I like being the best. There's no issue with striving for a personal best. But when you see your worth as better than someone else's for any specific reason, you're creating more obstacles for yourself in the future, which your mind won't recognize as related. I would ask you if you're doing this just to glamorize the struggle and the idea that you had to do all this hard work to get where you are. If that's the case, you're prioritizing the ego payoff and how it looks to other people, and your return on investment for your energy will always be on the low end because you can't access soul fulfillment from that vantage point. This is in contrast to doing what you do every day just for the joy and satisfaction you get from it, which will lead to a higher ROI with no ceiling because the divine intelligence will send you more specific guidance when you align with your soul like that. But the mind is the ego consciousness, so you have got to decondition the mind enough so you're able to allow your soul to lead the way. Always remember, the mind is designed as a tool to be in service to the soul. People who go for the ego payoff are allowing their mind to be their master, and therefore they will inevitably hit a ceiling until they realize what's going on and then start aligning with their own inner guidance. The mind won't realize that an obstacle originated from the excess potential that was created, and it will simply try to overcome that obstacle by force. We've already said that the more we try to achieve our goals with force using internal intention, the more frustration and lack compound in our inner image. If we're not aware of how an excess potential has created an obstacle in our life, then we think our only choice is to do battle with the problem after it manifests. Since we're not addressing the cause of the obstacle itself, which was the overvaluation or the undervaluation, even if we do manage to tackle this obstacle, another one will simply take its place. The underlying excess potential is still there. That's why so many people believe that problems just occur due to chance. They just pop up over and over, seemingly without cause. But it's really a result of what's inside our inner image. The Cosmic Flow Code is a tool I created which will alert you to where you've unwittingly formed excess potentials, which are blocking you from directly hearing that guidance. It's available on my website, and it lets you decondition the mind so that you can step out of comparative reality and instead find the entrance to the miraculous mirror cycle for your own soul, which seemed so elusive to you before. After reading it, you'll wonder why you ever thought this stuff was so complicated. I'll see you in part 3 of this Inner Agility series.